scourge of situations like this. So I'm just going to read out some quantitative data, and in particular, I'm going to talk about the economic costs, because there's so many multiplicity of costs, what we've heard today. There's social, there's even health costs, such as it costs us mental health. But I'm going to just read out some economic costs of domestic violence in the developed world. So first example I have is Canada. Spousal violence was estimated at $7.4 billion in 2009. In Australia, a study in 2015 estimated cost of violence against women at $13.6 billion per year, of which $465 million is borne by employers. And the third example I'm going to state is about the UK. The domestic cost in 2008 was about $16 billion, including services lost, economic output, and human and emotional consequences, costs. Now, I'm just giving you an example of pre-COVID. Now, COVID, as we have heard, has exacerbated that problem, and the costs had multiplied even more. So, the Commonwealth Economic Cost of Violence Against Girls in Small States program, it has produced a framework to determine the economic cost of violence against women and girls for various sectors in the economy and for the state. And the costs that are calculated in the methodology entail direct costs, indirect costs, and induced cost. It is an analytical framework as a practical tool for policymakers in small states for evidence-based policy, formulation, planning, and decision-making for eliminating violence and achieving SDGs. This methodology was developed by the Commonwealth Secretariat and piloted in 2 countries, 2 small states, Seychelles in 2019 and Lesotho in 2020. In Seychelles, so I'm giving examples of other parts of the world. In Seychelles, the cost of violence to girls was found to be about 3% of GDP on learning time lost in school. The cost to adult women around 2.3% of GDP, cost to the private sector about 2% of GDP, and thus the cost to the whole society is nearly 5% of GDP. In Lesotho, the cost of violence to girls was about 1% of GDP, the cost to adult women about 3% of GDP, and in total, the cost to GDP, 6% of GDP in 2017. And in both cases, it also shows evidence of how it impacts health and education and multiplicity of other aspects. So what the program has done also has provided these tools for addressing this, as well as training people to be able to implement these mechanisms and policies so that when a country chooses to address these issues, they will have a strategic process and a policy formulation to plan programs to address these issues, and we have been training officials and researchers in Seychelles and Lesotho. I'll stop here. Jocelyn, do you want me to go on? Okay, I'll just say one more thing. This is the program in terms of economic costs. I just want to say the leadership today, I think the importance of these kind of commitments and leaderships is absolutely crucial. And I also want to highlight the aspect of understanding issues in a multidimensional way. And hence it was great that we had Amina Mohammed, who's the chair of the Sustainable Development Group. And I say this in particular from personal experience of being a survivor of domestic violence. When my mother and I, as a schoolgirl, we had no voice, but the problem is that it wasn't a simple problem. It was a problem because I had a brother who had mental health issues. So this is why, for me, the importance of this is to understand things in multidimensional way, because this is why COVID has shown that it has increased. It's not because men want to, torture women. It is because there are multiplicities of issues. No mother or brother or nobody wants to hurt somebody. So we have to understand the issues in the multiple aspects of the reasons for which they exist, and also health systems and economic systems, or loss of jobs, or some aspirations that our young men are not receiving. So I think to address this fully, we need to understand things in a multidimensional way. And I really appreciate the men who are in this room and the leadership by the Sierra Leone's, the First Lady of Sierra Leone mentioned about her husband's leadership. So I want to thank the leadership that has been expressed and the commitment that has been expressed in this room today. And I do hope we progress faster toward elimination of these kind of very difficult issues in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Ruth Kutumari. She has to be at another engagement, so she would like to take leave of us. I would like to call upstage Oluwaseun Osowobi Ayodeji. She's a Nigerian women's She's a Nigerian women's rights activist and founder of the Stand to End Rape initiative. Please give her a round of applause as she takes her seat. Now, my next question goes to Saima Wazid Hussein. And it's, please explain the relevance of your work and how the WHO initiative complements the efforts of member states to end violence against women and girls and achieve SDG Goal 5.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me express my pleasure in being a part of this panel and this conversation. The commitment of the leadership is very impressive to this issue that affects us all in one way or the other. As far as the commitment of the WHO and the issue of violence against women and girls, we have various different aspects of the programs that addresses this. Certainly women's gender health, which includes physical health, issues within the mental health program, and the fact that within a part of SDGs, it's a core goal to address women's well-being and health, incorporates what is truly needed to address this issue. Like a previous speaker said, there are violence against girls is not just one act. It has a duplicitous, multiple aspects associated with it. So having programs that address poverty, we know when poverty actually leads to a lot of increased violence, economic hardship leads to violence. We know we've all experienced the growing number within the global pandemic that we've had, how the cases of domestic violence has increased. So many other related issues are linked to it. And within the WHO, the plans that are there in order to address this is incorporated in specific programs. And the hope is really having this framework that is a global action plan framework incorporates information from research, from data, in order to not just address one act. I don't want to minimize the act of violence. I don't mean to do that. But what I mean by that is not take one incident and address it in one way, but to understand the whole of the issue and address it in the various facets that it exists. So within relationship, within the issue of communication, when you talk about violence, that's intimate partner violence, to address it by enabling and assisting people, providing services that engage better communication between partners. That we know, there is evidence that helping healthier ways of communicating, healthier ways of addressing disputes and differences can reduce potentials for violence. Teaching young boys, changing their belief system, teaching them respect of girls from a very earlier age, that ultimately impacts how a young boy grows into a young man, and his attitude and beliefs, and what is acceptable behavior within, and would reduce violence. Ensuring that health services are there and accessible for women, particularly when they have experienced violence in different situations, that that negative does not continue to impact. Relating, providing services for pregnancy, for sexual health, that is sort of a product of experiencing violence. Creating safe environments. So awareness in workplaces, awareness of how streets needs to be safer, creating a social settings that realizes that you're treating women in disrespectful manner, and changing the cultural, sometimes very embedded cultural practices that ultimately lead to violence against women, because it comes from a belief of core disrespect. So again, transforming attitudes and beliefs, I think that's a huge area of need, and for many of our societies, particularly in relationships where we believe that women are often spouses, have the right to punish their spouse in a physical manner, which is very acceptable. I want to add one thing that, when we talk about violence and we're talking about sexual violence, one of the facets of the violence that we keep forgetting is the emotional and verbal abuse. The intense and prolonged effects of emotional and verbal abuse often goes unsaid, unheard, and we do not really address that as much as we can. We don't define it within the criteria of violence, and I hope that in the future that certainly will be incorporated. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, you did mention something about the pandemic and the fact that it has highlighted a lot of abuse, especially in the homes. Now, one of the things I know is we can never achieve any of our SDG goals if we don't eradicate violence against women completely. Now, given your vast experience, describe the mental health consequences, because you did touch on verbal and emotional abuse that we don't really talk about. But if you can describe the mental health consequences and the negative impact of sexual violence against women and girls, and the practical action to support survivors of sexual violence.
Well, when we talk about violence, and the effect is very much the area of study of trauma. It's a traumatic experience, it's prolonged. When it comes to particularly domestic violence, you have intimate partners, people who are supposed to be your protectors, supposed to take care of you, who are now violating your most fundamental right, and distorting your reality. So your mental health is not only affected by the trauma of the experience, but also a lack of trust in yourself, in your own experience and those around you, believing that your life around you, people around you are there to protect you, and fundamentally changes how you forever respond. So prolonged anxiety, leading to depression, debilitating, emotional, leading to poor self-esteem. Oftentimes, women are not able to reach out and get the help or have the opportunity to talk about it. So that silence then is your secondary trauma. That leads again to poor physical health, that leads to substance abuse, that leads to also you continuing and having poor coping mechanisms that you've then passed on to your children. We teach girls and women to kind of grow up and be peaceful, keep peace. We teach girls to be the peacemakers, right? So when they experience violence, the perpetrators are also teaching them that they were the cause of it, that now the responsibility is on the victims to again find ways of solving the problem, a problem that they cannot solve. So imagine that, you know, the dichotomy of experience, like you're experiencing violence and your reality is being challenged and you are continuously being taught that what you experience, what you feel was not correct. Yeah. So what does that really do mentally in how you address every other problem in your life? Every other solution you reach for is impacted. Women are then losing their confidence. They're losing the ability to progress in their work. They're teaching their children then also to continue to behave in that same manner. So yes, you know, how do we address it? Do we really address it? I want to say that yes, these are the beginnings, but at the heart of it is the core belief system, the cultural practices that continue. You know, we think that women should be quiet, that women should, you know, be a little bit stronger. You know, they experience the violence, they experience the trauma, and we put it on them to also find the solution. You know, we are the ones who are mainly talking about it. So we also need, part of the solution is changing how we are addressing it and involving men and changing their attitude. And that certainly cannot be done within any one program, in all honesty. I think it's a good start, but it has to really start from a young age for both boys and girls, for girls not to accept such behavior, and for boys not to accept perpetuating these behaviors.
Thank you very much, Saima, for your submission. I'd like to move on to Melissa. Honorable Melanie Jolly, sorry, Melanie. Now, can you tell me what your outfit is doing to help eradicate violence against women?
Well, thank you, Jocelyn, for this important question. Great to be on a fantastic panel with all of you. And thank you all for the courageous ones staying in the room. I know that I may be, or we may be between you and your lunch. So thank you so much for being here. Well, of course, Canada has strong ties with Rwanda because of General Dallaire and also his institute, but also even within our ministerial office, Eloge Butera, who is Rwandese, is one of my senior counselors. And tomorrow we'll have the chance to go meet with his mom, who is a woman leader and is in charge of a women's shelter here in Kigali. Now, Canada is a feminist government. We have a gender lens on all our policies, may it be all given legislations, may it be our budget, or, for example, the fact that we came up with a new childcare system in Canada. And of course, this also translates itself within our own foreign policy, trade policies, and assistance programs. Mm-hmm. So for us, women's rights are human rights. And we know that 1 in 3 women are victims of sexual violence. And Her Royal Highness was referring to the fact that in times of crisis, it's even worse. Of course, we know that. We've seen it during the pandemic. It was the case in Canada. It was the case around the world. But at the same time, we know that this is unacceptable and we need to do more. So we have 3 priorities. The first one is really supporting more sexual and reproductive health assistance. The second one is everything in line with early forced marriage. Mm-hmm. And the third one is also anything in line with genital mutilation. So we go ahead and provide assistance through different programs. We co-lead, for example, a resolution at the UN regarding child and early forced marriage. Another thing, another initiative that we launched recently was with the UK to support the Murad Code, which is based on the fantastic work of Nadia Murad, who's a Nobel Peace Prize, to deal with women that are survivors of gender-based violence. And also we're providing support for investigation and also the fact of going to trial for sexual violence abuses in Ukraine. We are also working with community organizations to help counter child and early forced marriage in Bangladesh, in India, in Pakistan, in Mozambique, and Tanzania. And I was hearing the first lady from Sierra Leone, your friend, yes, just a bit before, and it would be a pleasure to work with her and work within Sierra Leone. And we're also supporting the global program to end child marriage, which is reaching close to 2.6 million young girls. So we took a decision 6 years ago when we became a government. We could decide to continue our international aid programs as is, or we could really be more targeted. And we decided to be more targeted because we're a feminist government. And so our entire approach is based on women and girls assistance. This is why it's a pleasure for me to participate with the great leaders here at this panel to voice this matter. But this is also why we want to do more to bring the question of sexual violence and also women empowerment to the world stage. This is Canada's vision, and of course our goal is to do much more with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now the question remains that how do you even stay on top of these wonderful things you've mentioned, right? Because it's all well and good when you speak about it, but do you go back, do you follow up, and what is the database like? What is it saying statistically right now?
Well, Justin, we don't know each other a lot, but I'm very much of a retail politician. I like people and I like understanding their lives and, you know, their own realities. Mm-hmm. So, of course, we can continue to talk on panels, or we can actually go on the ground and meet women that are facing these issues. So that's what I try to do when I'm traveling around the world. For example, I was in Indonesia 2 months ago, and we offered dignity kits to women that were survivors of gender-based violence. We went also in Vietnam to meet a co-op led by women to make sure that they would have access to opportunities and develop tea plantations in Vietnam. So these are the type of things we're doing, but you know, it's not only words, it's money, it's putting money where our mouth is, and so that's why we've increased massively our assistance. And meanwhile, I'm doing the political work to see how that money is well spent, well invested, and basically be able to show Canadians back home why it is so important for Canada to do this work.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you. The next question is to Professor Prajapati Trivedi. Please provide critical advice and suggestions to assist member states use a guidebook on how best to achieve the implementation of SDG Goal 5.
Thank you very much. I'm sure everyone has read that guidebook, and so I don't have to speak about it much. For one or two who may not have read it, here is some advice. But I think reading is probably an essential part of that. But the word that you will find most used in this guidebook, and this is the big difference between this guidebook and anything that I have read, is it's focused on implementation. It's implementation, implementation, implementation. I mean, these ideas are wonderful, and they've been articulated in a manner that can't be done by us. I mean, these are leaders who capture the essence of the problem. So this guidebook is on implementation number one. The most frequently, if you search, the word that it uses is systems. That is the most frequently used word. So it's a systems approach, number one.
Yeah.
And then you may ask, what's a systems approach?
Yeah.
Yeah, what is a systems approach? Well, this is also not a Nobel Prize winning idea, but it's an important idea, and it's an idea that has worked for a long time. And the credit goes to someone called Peter Drucker, who said that the effectiveness of any institution, organization depends 80% on systems and 20% on people. And within that people's category, 80% is leadership, and the rank and file is the rest. So in a sense, all you need is a great leader with a great system. And you can really do anything. As Alexander the Great and Ashoka the Great, these kings conquered the world for you. No one knows the names of the rank and file, but you know. So I believe that any king that has a name great attached to it was a systems person, basically. And that's why they were great. Now, coming to this issue, I will be brief. It has, for those who have already read and those who may want to read, an excellent example of the Secretary General's whole of systems approach. And you may wonder what that is. And I will elaborate on that just a little bit, because that's the key difference between this and the rest of the things that have been written thus far. And that is that you can't just say Ministry of Gender has to do this. I mean, this has been said earlier that you need whole of systems. And the Secretary General did that when she was a minister. But you have to ask why she was so successful. And she was. I'm not saying because I've had something to do with the Secretariat. She was. You can ask anyone. She was extremely successful, saved billions of pounds, not millions. The reason was because there was an enabling environment in the government at that point. They had something called public service agreements, which provided a whole of system approach to whole of system approach, in a sense that there was a meta system which supported her. This could not have been if it was her own idea that I'm going to do this. She was in a very, very... So the first lesson that you asked, that what can we learn from it, and would be that this can't be done, even if you use a systems approach, unless it's really whole of system, and that too a meta, in the sense that the government must have that policy. So Secretary General is one, but the other example which I find more fascinating, and people who are in Rwanda should actually go and talk to every other Rwandan, they have a policy, and you know, you've seen that they have a very successful, and I think it's mentioned several times, Isanje is their program. One-stop shop for gender violence. It's highly successful. You may wonder why. You know, why Rwanda could do it. In fact, you may wonder why the streets are so clean, why everything is working so well. This is a bigger question. And again, the answer lies in the system. And Rwanda has an excellent system which no one knows. It's called IMHIGO. IMHIGO, and this is not a recent one. In fact, I would say Rwanda is where it is, if you look at it, IMHIGO. It is a system where the word IMHIGO is from Kenya, Rwanda, the language, which means in the traditional structure in Rwanda, the chiefs used to go to a bigger chief and make a commitment that this is what I'm going to do. So IMHIGO is really literally a commitment for something or results. So IMHIGO is the enabling environment which has allowed, if you look at the IMHIGO of Isanje, you will know why it works, because it's not an isolation. It works in an environment which forces. It's like you want to develop private sector, which is called, using the World Bank language, investment climate. You have to do many things. It's not just one. So you have to have that investment climate, even if the private sector has to make the investment. So I think, again, just to summarize the answer to your question, it would be a systems approach, whole of systems approach, but a meta system in the sense it can't be that I, as a systems builder, go there and do it. There has to be an enabling environment which supports my system as well. And this guidebook has answers, very concrete answers, and it's developing, and it's going to be the first practical handbook how to convert this vision into results.
Thank you for this. I think what I've picked right now from everything you said is a collective effort. It doesn't take just one person, and that's what we've been saying throughout the entire day. So thank you for answering this question. My next question goes to Melissa. Yeah, you ready? Okay. So, Melissa, please describe the benefits of the Commonwealth Says No More campaign and relevance for member states to achieve the SDG 5.
We've heard, thank you, Jocelyn, so much. And we've heard so much today about the systems and the reading of the guidebook. And it was a joy to write, I must say. And when you think about the Commonwealth Says No More, it is the phrase that you used, Professor Trivedi. Can you repeat it again? That is that Kenyan Rwandan word?
Imigo.
Amigo, where it is about systems coming together and people coming together. And Commonwealth Says No More is really that actual act. Because what it is that we take into account that when we are building the bridge that will reach people, we have the victim's voice or the survivor's voice, the person who has walked this journey like me at the very foundation of that bridge. And then the guidelines become the ramparts that help us cross that bridge. And what Commonwealth Says No More is, it is a global initiative that brings different parts of society together and serves not only Commonwealth member states, but civil society organizations, and also serves NGOs, businesses, healthcare systems, so that we can all participate, including individuals who want to be that voice to take positive action and move forward. It really is all about having collegiate partnerships. And those collegiate partnerships recognize the uniqueness and the commonality of each of the Commonwealth member nations. It delivers free access, materials, and support to end violence against women and girls. It provides an arena for discussion, to share good practice, to share the data, to share the impact, and to learn about the really epidemic of violence against women and girls so we don't have to replicate. Can you imagine that we can learn from each other on a platform so that perhaps one Commonwealth member nation will learn from her sisters, will learn from her brothers. So it is about bringing this all together. It provides support in a very collaborative framework to help all victims of domestic and sexual violence. There's a global directory for all Commonwealth nations that is part of Commonwealth Says No More, and you can click on your flag and you can see all of the resources there, many of whom have been in this room with us today. And it shares advocacy. We've seen the video of Join the Chorus. It means so much to know that there are so many who will come and break the cords so that our voices can raise up, so that we are not silent. And that is what Commonwealth Says No More does. And ultimately, it's about partnerships that commit to take active action and positive action and to learn from each other to end violence against women and girls.
So where does one go if they want to be a partner? You know, you did mention partnership. So is there a particular website we can go to? Where do we go if you want to be partners?
Well, it's so exciting because we have on, and I wrote it down, so I'm going to just refer to it, 4.4 on page 30 and 4.5 on page 31 of our guidebook talks about how you can set up your own No More chapter. Because Commonwealth Says No More is part of the No More family. We are a family much like Commonwealth member states are. So how do we actively do the work? You can set up a No More chapter in your community, in your state, in your country. And how you do that is to sit down and think about what is it that you want to achieve, put together a proposal, think about how you want to reach your community, think about how you will financially sustain that, and give us a call at no more. And we would love to talk with you. And what we'll do is sit down and explore those ideas with you, because it is a sisterhood arrangement and a brotherhood arrangement, as you saw with Cyprus Says No More. Men and business leading change. What they do is very different from what they do in Ecuador, what they do in the United Kingdom. Each chapter makes a significant difference. So really, just get in touch with us, have a conversation, we'll talk about an MOU, and we'll take positive action together. We will meet every 45 days, and we will walk with you. And it's so exciting to know that those resources are there. Thank you, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much for this. Exciting times ahead. It's a collective effort, so yes, together we can. Now, I have here Oluwaseun Ayodeji. She's a Nigerian women's rights activist and a founder of the Stand to End Rape initiative. Now, Oluwaseun, tell us, share with us your experience as to why the work you're doing is invaluable.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Oluwaseun, and I'm a survivor of sexual violence. And that's why the work I do is invaluable, because I understand the pain and the suffering of women who have experienced sexual or domestic violence. I work for Stand to End Rape Initiative. We're a youth-led organization based in Nigeria, and the work we do centers around awareness, policy advocacy, prevention, and support. We've been working with the Nigerian government to improve policies that promote women's access to political participation, women's access to services, sexual reproductive health and rights, and just women's capacity to be themselves without fear of violence or lack of representation in government. In March 2022, we had 5 bills in our National House of Assembly rescinded because women were asking for basic rights like conferring citizenship on their partners who are foreigners. We also had a bill that was rescinded because women were asking for 35% representation in government. So what we've been doing is working with coalitions to engage governments to reconsider those bills, because we need representations and policies that protect our rights and ensure that we're getting the services that we require. Also, with support from the Ford Foundation, we've been working with the 36 states in Nigeria to evaluate and assess the systems, the policies, and programs that they have. Are they really meeting the needs of women at the grassroots, or are these just policies at the national levels? And what is quite interesting is, from majority of the states we've visited, we realize there is a lack of gender budgeting. Even when ministries have budget for women's issues, they are unable to access it. So one of the things we're currently doing is, unfortunately, we have an election coming up next year, so we'd have new people come on board. But right now, we're engaging with ministers and permanent secretaries of those ministries to include gender budgeting in the next, because unfortunately it's late, but at least prioritize women's rights, women's needs in the budgets for the next year. As a founding member of the Nala Feminist Collective, which is a Pan-African young feminist group across Africa, we are working and engaging governments of different countries on their commitment at the Generation Equality Forum. Nigeria, for instance, made a commitment of $500 million, to ending child marriage. Our question is, what has happened so far? Where are the gaps, and how can we help you? So in July 2022, about 14 of us will be in Nigeria working with the Ministries of Women Affairs, Finance, Budget and Planning, to really see where the monies are going, what is being done, and if there are gaps and knowledge that we can bring aboard as young feminists, we can also share that. In 2021, part of our work was to ensure women were safe at home and also in the workplace. So we carried out a research on sexual harassment in the workplace, and we're able to get about 493 respondents across Nigeria. And 64% of those respondents reported to have experienced one form of sexual harassment or the other. So what we are currently doing is we're working with the human resource department of major companies in Nigeria to include sexual harassment prevention and response policy as part of their standard policies, and also establish systems that listens to survivors, ensures they get justice, and perpetrators face the law. Also in 2021, I think it was the Duchess of Cornwall who made reference to a young Nigerian, Vera Uwaila, who was raped to death in the church. Well, she died, unfortunately. And that stirred up a state of emergency GBV committee, which I'm a part of in Nigeria. And what we did was to engage governors of different states to say, there is a policy, a law in front of you, your state houses of assembly are yet to pass this law, and it's called the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill. It's the act at the federal level, but because we run a federal system, state governments are mandated or expected to adopt the policies at the state level. But unfortunately, majority of the state are not. So what we started doing was to engage the Nigerian Governors Forum to declare a state of emergency on GBV in Nigeria, which we successfully achieved in 2021. And based on that declaration, we've had more one-stop rape crisis centers established, we've had more shelters established, and over 28 states in Nigeria have now passed and adopted, I beg your pardon, the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill.
So one question before you go on, how are we holding these perpetrators accountable? We're talking about policies, changing, government policies and all that good stuff. But I think the question is, how do we hold these perpetrators accountable to set an example so that there won't be a next victim? Because we're talking about the victims, but what are we doing about the perpetrators as well? Yeah. What are the laws being passed for those people?
So I just referenced one of the laws, which is the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Bill. What it does is it gives a minimum of 14 years imprisonment for rape. And it also recognizes the rape of boys, which our penal code and the other codes that we have do not recognize. So there's been an improvement in that regard. But importantly, we are focusing on systems change. How can we change the behaviors and perceptions of boys and girls and men and women alike, on preventing sexual violence? So with support from the Canadian Embassy in Nigeria, we are establishing a consent education learning platform where boys and girls in school and out of school can learn about, positive masculinity, bodily autonomy, gender equality, respect for women's rights, and we can begin to change the perception of people, because we don't have enough jails, unfortunately, but we want to prevent it from happening. And for those who end up perpetrating the violence, we have laws in place now to get them into where they deserve to be.
Well, thank you very much. Shall we give them all a round of applause? This has been a wonderful panelist discussion, wonderful session. It's been an honor moderating this, and thank you all for sharing. Don't forget to look through the guidelines for implementation pamphlet, and together we can. It's a collective effort. That's all I've been hearing here today. Violence against women is not just about women speaking, it's about men, women, and everybody alike getting involved. And so thank you so much for coming out today. My name is Justin Dumain. It's been a pleasure moderating this and hosting this entire event. Thank you. Thank you to us as panelists as well. Thank you so much.